spicy. Jimmy Garoppolo on there could be a benefit, but have they kind of burned that bridge?
We'll say this. Gardner Minshew is the best backup in the NFL.
I love Gardner. Welcome to 30 Minutes of Football with Legit Football. I am your host, Brian McFadden. We have an extra special episode today. This is our fantasy football episode. It is September 20th, 2022. We are live. We just wrapped up week 2, going into week 3, and I could not be more excited for my guest this week. If any of you happen to know the name of the podcast that I previously hosted, it was called the Pigskin Party Podcast. It's what got me into NFL content creation. It's what led me to Legit Football in the first place. And there was a voice that you heard as one of my co-hosts, and that was Mr. Tommy Yu, who was guesting with me this week on 30 Minutes of Football. Tommy Yu, who has his own PDL Dyning Podcast, a very special podcast for the greatest dynasty league in the land, the Fantasy Dynasty League. Tommy, welcome to 30 Minutes of Football, dude.
Oh, man, guys, I know I usually ramble a lot, but I'm going to try to keep it short so we get a lot of good fantasy goodness on this episode. But after weeks of pleading with Brian, because, oh, man, this guy has connections. He could have had any guest, but finally he broke down saying, all right, Tommy, I'll finally have you on an episode. But no, in all seriousness, I am so excited to be here with you and, yeah, chatting it up fantasy football, just like the old days, huh?
Bribery and flattery go a long way with me. No, just kidding. It was honestly, I knew at one point I had to have you on, Tommy. You were originally a guest on Pigskin Party, and it just, the chemistry was great. You were so good, I had to bring you on as a co-host, so there was no way I wasn't going to have you on for this. Shout out to any PDL members who are listening. I am a member of that, so there is a connection. I got into that Dynasty League because of Tommy. I'm sure the PDL will come up multiple times. Tommy, are you familiar with the format for 30 Minutes of Football?
Of course, I have to be a loyal follower. A lot of people in my, and I'm sorry if we say PDL, that is a home league that I'm in that I created with a lot of nurture and care. But we're also really big fans of everything Brian has been doing. So admittedly, I haven't been following the podcast as close as I should, but I have a soft spot. So I have been trying to follow up the past 2-3 days. I followed up and listened to all the episodes because specifically good old Anthony's a part of the show too. So, I mean, I got to support you guys where I can. So I am familiar.
Just like old times. Let's go ahead and get this started. We're going to, as the guest, you automatically win the coin toss. So before we get started, would you like to receive or ask the first fantasy football question today?
You know, I'm going to be on the aggressive. Typically, I like to play defensively, but, you know, I came well prepared, so I wanted to at least show off a little bit of that goodness. And I want to kick it right off, Brian. And this is, a lot of the questions I have are a little bit hot takey because that's kind of where I come from, right? And so I wanted to start and say, you gotta
let me do the intro first. You gotta let me do the intro.
You're right. You're so right.
Just like Scott Hansen, 30 Minutes of Football with Legit Football starts now. Tommy, that is your cue. Ask away.
That's my cue. So were the rookies this year a little bit slept on? Because everyone has been talking about the 2023 draft class quite in depth, especially even during the 2022 draft class, which is kind of unheard of. Right now, only 2 weeks in, definitely, I guess, a hot take, but Garrett Wilson from the New York Jets currently finds himself as wide receiver 11, and Jahan Dotson finds himself as wide receiver 12 from the Commanders. These two are ahead of Jamar Chase. Once again, this is cherry pick stats, but I want to at least show off. This is 2 solid NFL weeks. This is not a preseason. This is actually happening. And Drake London has also been really impressive in Atlanta as the wide receiver 16, ahead of A.J. Brown, who's a part of the greatest football team, the Philadelphia Eagles. So everyone knows how great A.J. Brown has been doing, but Drake London, Garrett Wilson, and Jahan Dotson, all 3 of them have been having better fantasy seasons up to this point. I don't think this is sustainable, but it has to be a little bit of a surprise. So I would love to get your take, Brian, specifically on how disrespected the draft class really was.
Well, one of the things that I've mentioned on this show, and I believe even in our PDL chat, was the learning curve for wide receivers going from college to the NFL is not what it used to be. You mentioned Jamar Chase last year, Justin Jefferson, some of these just uber talented wide receivers, whether that is just the talent level is that much higher because these kids are preparing at a younger age to be an NFL wide receiver, or the NFL game is more mirroring these kind of college schemes, these spread offense, these high octane passing attacks. whatever the reason, we're seeing talented wide receivers come in on day one and be productive. You saw Jahan Dotson headlines. We were mentioning it in Legit Football in OTAs, rookie OTAs. Dotson was already shining. We've seen that with 3 touchdowns in his first 2 weeks. Wentz already trusts him. He's a go-to target, especially in the red zone. And then you get guys like Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave already had some shining moments in New Orleans. These guys who are just kind of ready to go. And so I don't know that they were slept on. I think the biggest maybe discrepancy with this draft class was with the quarterbacks. And we still haven't seen them, right? When we saw Malik Willis last night for like a few snaps.
With a fumble too.
We're just absolutely getting destroyed, and he fumbled. And Kenny Pickett, I think we'll see sooner rather than later with the way that Steelers offense is going. But I think it's just a testament to the quality of wide receivers we've been seeing the past few years, as well as that kind of easier translation and transition between the college game and the pro game. I don't think this is a blip. I don't think this is like just amazing draft classes. I think we've seen deep wide receiver classes for a few years now. Even if you go back to that Terry McLaurin, A.J. Brown, that season that just produced DK Metcalf, so many of those rookies. This is
even last year with Amon-Ra St. Brown really blossoming.
Right. Yeah, this is Jamar Chase. You mentioned him already. Jalen Waddle from last year. This is just, I think this is the new norm in the NFL. You're going to have these uber talented wide receivers who are ready to contribute in week 1 in the regular season. And for fantasy purposes, that's something you guys need to pay attention to. Tommy, do you have a take on this issue?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the real exciting part is the old fantasy mantra is rookie receivers typically really start to perform in the second half of the year. You see this every single year. And to see some of these receivers perform immediately right off the gate is something that is not normal. Maybe a little bit more normalized the past 2 years, kind of similar to what you said. But if history is to repeat itself, and these rookies that we've already talked about is supposed to get even better at the second half of the year, my goodness, let's hit that subscribe button on Garrett Wilson, Jahan Dotson, Drake London, Chris Olave, maybe even Traylon Burks figures it out. I mean, how exciting can that be? I don't know how sustainable it's going to be. I don't think that Jahan Dotson's going to be able to score a touchdown every single game like he has been so far. But to your point, I think at least specifically for receivers, I definitely agree with you. Teams are in need of a receiver, which is why they spend that high draft capital. So it's really interesting to see how fast they're able to produce, similar to what you said. Great.
And guys, real quick, last week we had not planned on taking questions, but a lot of you guys had fantasy questions, so we've kind of built that into the show this week. If any of you watching, if any of you in the chat want to have a fantasy question, we're definitely going to get to some start-sit things later, but just throw some questions out there. Anthony will make sure to start. We'll try to get to those. My first question to you, Tommy, is one of the things we're going to revisit every week on this particular episode is waiver wires. I just figured this is Tuesday. Waivers tend to clear on Wednesday, most likely in whatever league that you're in. This is a good time to kind of, who are you targeting? Who is on your radar as somebody that you want to pick up? So I'll throw that at you. Who are 1, 2, 3 guys who you're kind of seeing as guys you're prioritizing adding this week?
Absolutely. And this is kind of going to be a little bit of a mixed bag because depending on your league and who is going to be available is going to be completely up in the air. So I'm actually going to start a little bit backwards, and I would love a little bit of a give and take with you. Maybe I'll reveal one at the very bottom and slowly get a little bit higher saying, hey, maybe this guy won't be there. But one guy that should definitely be available that I would imagine is Darrell Williams from the Arizona Cardinals. I'm not saying he's going to be a league winner. I am not saying he's even going to be fantasy relevant. But if you've been paying attention to the news over in Arizona, yes, James Conner did exit the game with a little bit of an injury, and there was a huge uptake on Eno Benjamin, but more specifically Darrell Williams, which kind of surprised me. And to see how efficient he was with his touches has been fantastic. Just to contextualize this, he had 59 yards and a touchdown on just 8 carries, and that's pretty impressive. But once again, I don't think he's going to get all the pie. Or James Conner might not even miss much time. So this is a little bit difficult because I wanted to start off the show, especially with waiver wires, on someone who I believe should be available on a lot of people's things. Because I'm not going to sit here and be like, Jacoby Myers, go get him. He could be available, but more often than not, he might not be. So I kind of want to start there, but I would love to get your thoughts on Darrell Williams.
I specifically wanted to ask you about Eno versus Darrell, and you kind of hit that in the middle of your answer there. But I definitely, in my list here, I have Cards running backs. So I kind of grouped the two of them in together. I was big on Eno. I actually traded for him in our Dynasty League before the season started. I have James Conner.
Trade.
because I was not confident that Connor, literally, he has never played every game. Never. Even in Pittsburgh, even last year when he had 20 touchdowns, he did not play every game. There was a game where Eno came in actually against the San Francisco 49ers and had a really good game. So we know that Connor's injury prone. We know that he's touchdown dependent. So just having that handcuff just helps in so many ways. I'm a little bit more on Eno. We just, from a news perspective, legit football, we're all news oriented. We saw so many quotes from Kingsbury about how good Eno looked, and the beat writers saying the same thing. So I'm a little bit Eno, there's a little bit more, I guess we haven't seen. There's a little more enticement. We've kind of seen Darrell Williams. We've seen what he did when he was with the Chiefs. But honestly, I don't think you go wrong with either of these two. How about Noah Brown from the Cowboys? He is the leading receiver through 2 weeks now with Dak and with Cooper Rush, but I think especially more with Cooper Rush in the mix. They seem to have a chemistry that's apparent. Everybody who was drafting CeeDee Lamb early, maybe Simi Fehoko and Tolbert, but no, it ends up being Noah Brown, who's the leading Cowboys wide receiver. Do you think this is a fluke, or do you think this is, at least while Cooper Rush is quarterback, somebody that people should be targeting on waivers?
Man, who is Noah Brown? He's a 26-year-old guy, 5 years in the NFL, from Ohio State, and I'm going to be honest, Brian, I would say you would probably describe me as a fantasy football degenerate, and I barely knew who Noah Brown was. And to really see the chemistry, and I know that's such an overblown phrase. What does that even mean? Here, let me explain this real quick. CeeDee Lamb had 11 targets last game, which is what he had with Dak in week 1. He wasn't able to make much of it. Noah Brown only got 5 targets, and he caught all of them. And he led the team in receiving, and he got a touchdown, and they won in overtime or just whatever. But regardless,
last second field goal.
Yeah, last second field goal. Sorry. So regardless, I definitely feel like there's something there. I think the little caveat to that definitely is, well, how long is Dak going to be out? Is he going to be reliable when Dak does eventually come back? But for me, all the points are really showing that he knows what's going on. Not everyone that sees Noah Brown isn't going to see this physical specimen. He's not a right. Debo Samuel, DK Metcalf kind of guy.
I wouldn't say his ceiling is that high, but I think the floor is
definitely
decent at
not.
this point.
But he does look like someone who does understand the system, knows where he needs to be, and he obviously is reliable enough. And in today's NFL, look at all the top receivers. Of course, there are some that give you that high ceiling because they're just a phenomenal athlete, but more often than not, they're technical athletes that just understand what they need to do. When the bullets are flying, they just have that trust saying, I know where he's going to be. So I think there is something to kind of go off on there for sure.
Great. So let's list, I want to hear a few more of your waiver wire targets. I'll list mine, and then we do have a question in the chat, and then we'll go back to your next question. So give me just some names, and if there's specific context, you can briefly throw it in there, but just give me some other names you might be targeting this week, if any.
Of course. There is going to definitely be a huge run for Jimmy Garoppolo for obvious reasons.
Right.
People might
especially
already
in
have drafted him.
2 QBs.
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Completely agree. But other names to kind of look out for, and these are names that might not be available, admittedly. I know I kind of foreshadow a little bit of Jacoby Myers. A lot of people don't want any pass catchers in New England. I think Jacoby Myers is the guy. He's a huge target hog. He just had 13 targets last game, and he reeled that in for 9 catches. So if you're in a PPR format, even half PPR, he should absolutely be rostered, which is why I didn't want to bring up high, because he might not even be on your waiver wires. But last but not least, 49ers, that cursed backfield. What is happening? Eli Mitchell went down, but that's old news. Everyone already knows that. Trey Sermon got cut. Old news. Everyone knows that. How about that rookie that they drafted? Tyrion Davis-Price. Oh, maybe a high ankle sprain. Oh, would you look at this? They have another running back. Brian, what guy should we be looking at San Francisco? Because I think you know where I'm getting at, right?
Well, so I mentioned Jeff Wilson as a pickup, an obvious pickup last week, but Jordan Mason is the one I have on my radar. I think, once again, Jeff Wilson is not new. He's reliable. Shanahan, he'll get some looks early, but Mason has the higher ceiling. So as a guy who you're going to pick up and maybe not start this week, but stash, really, really high on Jordan Mason. He's my second waiver wire target after Noah Brown. Couple more guys real quick. Nico Collins actually out-targeted Brandon Cooks in Houston this week. You mentioned Jimmy G. And how about my kind of fantasy writer guy, Tyler Algier, had the same amount of carries as Cordero Patterson. I think it's inevitable that he's going to lead that backfield. I think that you're going to see Patterson get a lot more run as wide receiver because they need weapons and targets in Atlanta, those are guys I'm looking at. So let's bring up Leonardo Perez had a trade offer question that I wanted to address here. He says, would you offer Mike Evans, who is suspended for the next game, and Curtis Samuel or Kirk, I'm guessing that's Christian Kirk, for Debo and Dillon? He has Debo, Dillon. He also has Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins. Deontay Johnson is my other wide receiver. The other team needs wide receiver badly. Do you want to weigh on this one first, Tommy?
I would actually love to get your input. This isn't me buying time, but I know you are from that Bay Area, so you have a little bit more insight on that Debo Samuel. I know, once again, I apologize, listeners, but in the PDL, you are also an owner, you have A.J. Dillon on your team as well. So I feel like your background definitely is more impressive than my own. So I would love to get your input, and I would love to sprinkle in some of mine as well.
I also want to mention, I'm not going to put this up, but Leonardo also put in the chat that he has Aaron Jones and Mixon as his starters, so he doesn't need to rely on Dillon. That's a key component here. So you've got Dillon, although that's a nice bench stash. I think Aaron Jones had a great week, but I think Dillon in most times is going to be able to produce, especially goal line. I just think the way the Bears defense was set up, running outside the tackles worked better as far as them being susceptible to it, which is why Jones did well. But there'll be weeks where Dillon works better in the middle. This is interesting. Debo has great chemistry. You mentioned chemistry earlier with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, the question mark was there with Trey Lance, but now Jimmy G is the quarterback. We know what Debo's ceiling is with Jimmy G as the quarterback, and it's wide receiver 3. So I'm not sure that I would want to get rid of Debo, Leonardo, and I like Dillon as a plug-in on bye weeks. And Mike Evans, I'm not that high on. I'm not that high in the Bucs offense in general for a number of reasons. He's injury prone and he's suspended next week. Curtis Samuel is fun and he's nice, but he's not on Debo's level. And Christian Kirk, while he had a great game, it's still the Jaguars. So I would not take that offer. I would hold on to Debo and Dillon. Quick thoughts on this, Tommy?
He said he would actually be getting Debo and Dillon. So he would be the one to be able to receive that
I get Debo and Dillon.
Yeah.
Yes, do it. Opposite. Yeah. Get Debo and Dillon.
Yeah.
Yes.
So at first I was a little surprised to hear your answer, but I definitely agree. Mike Evans, yes, he is suspended for a game. And while that doesn't sound like a very big deal, in fantasy football, one win can get you a bye, or you could be out of the playoffs. Who knows? So I understand that I might be a little bit hyperbolic saying, oh, this isn't me saying Mike Evans is washed. Absolutely not, because he's essentially the only target in Tampa Bay when healthy, and he has always produced, especially with Brady, even though he's struggling. But kind of similar to what you mentioned, Curtis Samuel, great, but me being an NFC East fan, I understand what Washington can do and see how sustainable that could be. I'm not too sure. And Christian Kirk, honestly, might be one of the most attractive player in this group personally for me. So if you could actually hold on to Christian Kirk and send away Evans and Curtis Samuel, and somehow you get back a Debo Samuel, which could give you an easy wide receiver 1. I'm not saying top 5, but he could be top 12 easy in my opinion, especially with Jimmy Garoppolo along with A.J. Dillon, where just because Aaron Jones has a good game does not mean A.J. Dillon is washed by any means. This is how Aaron Jones has always been. He's been like Kamara light. He doesn't need many touches, but last game where he had like 1 billion touchdowns, by he, I mean Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon actually out-touched him or out-rushed him. So, I mean, he's still going to get his due. So if you're able to get a Debo and a solid running back for Mike Evans, who you might not even need because you already have a lot of wide receiver depth and they need it so bad, and a Curtis Samuel, I think that's a hit.
So no chime, but it is halftime. I want to quickly add on that, yes, I like that. And of those 3, I also value Kirk more than Samuel and Evans. So if you can keep Kirk, get rid of Evans and Samuel, yes, do that all day long. Guys, as always, this is the part where I tell you, if you're not already subscribed to Legit Football, what are you doing? It's 100% free. 5 days a week, we're giving you the top 6 NFL stories of the day. We also do injury roundups. You're always going to have the most up-to-date injury information, super relevant when it comes to fantasy. Just go to legitfootball.com, enter your email address. It's 100% free. You can always unsubscribe. Tons of valuable information. Make sure to check it out. Tommy, anything you want to plug? You want to give a little PDL plug here?
No, guys, seriously, I am not getting paid by Brian or anything like that. I'm not part of the Legit Football crew, but I am a subscriber, absolutely free. And although I'm a fantasy football degenerate, I have been getting really busy with work, adulting and things, but it's so convenient to just have one thing sitting right there with you. And I promise I'm not reading off of a script or anything like that. This is just genuine, authentic review. And I really think it should be able to give you guys a little bit of an edge compared to those who might not have heard of Legit Football for whatever reason.
Thank you, Tommy. Check is in the mail. All right, let's go ahead and get the second half started. Halftime speeches have been given. We're hydrated. We're ready to go. Tommy, are you ready for the second half?
Absolutely. I realize that a lot of my questions are kind of very similar, but that's going to definitely help for sure, at least with the format and theme of the show. So my next question is, what if Matt Ryan is not an upgrade from Carson Wentz like everyone has thought? Carson Wentz is currently the QB3, and he's supporting Curtis Samuel, who we just talked about, who's the wide receiver 9, Jahan Dotson, who's the wide receiver 12, and Terry McLaurin, who's wide receiver 26, which we all can agree. I'm not saying that's his floor, but he can do much better than that.
Yeah.
Whereas Matt Ryan, and once again, this is an overreaction, I agree, but that's part of the fun. 2 games in, Matt Ryan is quarterback 32. He has and he just had a 3 interception game against Jacksonville. But to be fair, I will contextualize. Michael Pittman did not play. They had almost no I don't even think Alec Pierce was out there.
He didn't.
Jonathan Taylor was struggling a little bit just because of how one-dimensional that they were getting. So yes, I am cherry picking 2 rough games, and the one game that Michael Pittman was in, he looked phenomenal, and he did what Matt Ryan does. He hyper-focuses the wide receiver 1. But outside of that, is that much of an upgrade? Because Michael Pittman did break out with Carson Wentz as well. And what Carson Wentz is doing over in with the Commanders has been impressive. And the narrative all offseason was, oh, well, Matt Ryan is in Indy, so everyone in Indy gets an upgrade, including Jonathan Taylor, the great offensive line. But it's almost kind of funny because 2 weeks in, it might sound like an overreaction, but we have to react with what has been given on film for the first 2 weeks of the season. So I'd love to get your take. What if Matt Ryan is not an upgrade from Wentz like everyone thought?
Well, there's 2 ways to answer this question. There's the fantasy way and the NFL way. So we'll start with the fantasy way. I don't think Matt Ryan is an upgrade over Carson Wentz. I never really did. I didn't think he was a downgrade. I think I kind of ranked them essentially the same for a few reasons. One, the Commanders, after 2 weeks, have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. This team is going to be playing from behind a lot. And Wentz has shown the ability to put up high numbers, sprinkle in with some interceptions. That's just the Wentz experience. We've seen it in both games. In week 1, it was kind of split up where he started off hot, then he threw some interceptions to let the Jaguars back in the game. Then he finished hot. And this game started horrible, took a sack in the end zone. They were getting shut out by Detroit, and then he really turned it on at the end. So that's just the Wentz experience. From a fantasy perspective, though, he is going to put up more points. That Washington offense is clearly more dynamic. So there's a lot more weapons. Like I said, they're going to be playing from behind, I think, more often than the Colts. I think the Colts have played the Colts have played 2 road games. I'd like to think that Ryan will get it kind of settled out. Pittman should be back this week. So from an NFL perspective, I'd still rather have Matt Ryan, future Hall of Fame quarterback, who's taken his team to a Super Bowl, leading my Colts team in an AFC South that's ripe for the taking even after your 0-1-1 start. But from a fantasy perspective, very much targeting Wentz. How about you?
I completely agree. I feel like I actually heard it on another podcast, so I'm not going to try to plagiarize. So I don't remember which podcast, but people are almost kind of saying Wentz is almost like the Brandon Cooks of quarterbacks. No one really respects him. Actually, no one really hates Brandon Cooks. People actually do hate Carson Wentz. By people, I mean probably Indianapolis don't like him. Eagles fan actually love him a lot now because we were able to get
a bunch of draft picks for him.
Yeah, like I love that guy. But honestly, all jokes aside, I feel like Wentz. A lot of times in fantasy football, a big player's name carries a lot of value. Like, look at Adrian Peterson at the end of his career. You're probably able to squeeze out a trade with extra value, which you probably shouldn't have been able to get just because of his name. Whereas Carson Wentz is like the opposite effect, right? You hear Carson Wentz, and you're like, oh, God, I don't want this guy on my team. But if you look at the numbers, just pretend his name isn't there. Maybe go into your settings in your league and just change his nickname to just something completely different. Just call him Billy Bob, and you'll be happy.
Player A.
Exactly. Yeah. Player A. Just censor it out, but I agree with you. I would heavily be targeting Carson Wentz if he's available, or honestly, whoever might have picked him up by now, if they're streaming, they're probably pretty happy with him.
I want to go ahead and get into some buy-sell. We're going to start with selling. We do have a question in the chat. Richard J. says, time to sell high on Clyde Edwards-Helaire in Dynasty. So this is a great one to get you started, and then we'll get your opinion on who you should sell high on. Is it time to sell high specifically in the Dynasty format for CEH?
I love this question because I am not a fantasy expert by any means. No one is. But my background is definitely Dynasty football. That's what my PDL league is, and that's almost strictly all I play now. So is CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, a buy high or
Sell high.
Sorry, sell high for dynasty purposes? I say absolutely not. I say, or in my belief, Kansas City, I lived there for 2 years, but that doesn't make me an expert in the Kansas City Chiefs. Anyone can watch them. But from what I've been hearing from news reports and what I've been seeing with my own two eyeballs, the reports out of Kansas City, especially what Patrick Mahomes has been saying, is every week is going to be a new receiver. Someone's going to be featured. Someone's going to catch a bomb, or the game plan on how defenses play when we arrive. Then we will know who's going to play. I think Clyde, and this is going to sound like a hyperbole, is the engine that can help this offense go. Yes, Mahomes is Mahomes. Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce. I completely agree. But after that, Juju? Sky Moore? Definitely not. What is it? My answer is simply, it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's going to be able to get those little chunk plays here and there where it's a little drop off, or just run it right up because people are trying to respect what Patrick Mahomes can do. I think Clyde is going to be one of the more consistent players in fantasy football, barring injury. But I think what a lot of people are hoping when they drafted him, I know a lot of people drafted him ahead of Jonathan Taylor. I'm not saying that's the season he's going to give you, but he's finally going to be able to deliver on the very high draft price that you probably got him as a rookie. So if you're looking to sell when he's finally giving you a little bit of what you wanted, I think it would be a mistake unless someone is really drinking that Kansas City Kool-Aid saying, oh man, Clyde is going to be a top 5 running back. Maybe he could. I don't see that in the cards, but I definitely do see a very, very maybe high-end running back 2, maybe even low-end running back 1, just depending on how things go in Kansas City. But I don't think right now is the time to sell, especially depending on how you're looking. But more often than not, if you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you probably weren't anticipating this big of an explosion. So he could be a depth piece that you sell off to get a huge upgrade somewhere else. In that instance, maybe, but specifically from a dynasty aspect, just because of how small the running back window is, what would you be getting? So I would love to get your take on that, because obviously I'm a little bit more biased being a Kansas City fan.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the whole Isaiah Pacheco hype, and I think that's really where this question comes from, is a lot of people, after seeing how well he did in training camp, Pacheco, wearing number 10, wearing that Tyreek number, kind of the next budding star, for dynasty purposes, is it more attractive to have Pacheco or CEH, or do you think CEH, after these first 2 weeks, has shown that he can still be the lead back in Kansas City? That's really more what I'm getting at. Quick thoughts on that.
And that's a fantastic way to kind of word it. And obviously, Brian, you probably know my feelings on Pacheco a little bit more just because I am pretty active in my home league and I chat a lot. But when I was hearing Pacheco news go absolutely bonkers and the hype train is still going, I didn't really understand where it was coming from. Yes, he was athletic, but everyone in the NFL is athletic. That doesn't make that big of a difference for me, unless you're like Casey Hampton. Oh, wow. I don't know why I used him, but I try to think of the biggest lineman I could think of. He's an old Steelers lineman who was just a ball.
That was random.
Unless you're him trying to chase like Chris Johnson, then more often than not, the linebackers that you're running up against are just as athletic as you. Maybe doesn't have that 0.01 speed extra difference, but at the end of the day, I didn't really understand the Pacheco news only because I saw more of his special teams and maybe some relief scat back kind of role, who is very explosive, very physical. But as a running back, Clyde is miles better, in my opinion, at least. He is head and shoulders better at everything. But when it comes to the physical components, that's where the analytics and the film crowd, when it comes to the fantasy community, you have the people who enjoy watching and the people who, I always joke saying, they're like the keyboard warriors. They only look at analytics, and I even question if they even watch football, because they're only like, oh, look at the 4.2% of ball. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about right now. But when I see him touch the ball, he's good. But Isaiah Pacheco, I definitely think he does have a relevant way of being fantasy gold. But for me personally, at least for the next year or two, I don't see that being a very big possibility. But I would love to get your take, because once again, I am a little bit more biased.
Well, I'm not going to go too much into this because we got a few more things to get to. We got just over 6 minutes left. I do want to get some candidates for you for sell high. That was, kind of what we're getting this into. We went into the CEH stuff.
Yes, sir.
Tommy U tells you keep CEH. Do not sell high unless you get an insane price. So do you have any candidates quickly that you're selling high on, since you're not selling high on CEH? It could be in Dynasty or in redraft format.
Absolutely. I would definitely have to actually ask you, it was one of my questions that we're not going to go too deep into, but I think it's too late. What are your thoughts on CeeDee Lamb? There's a lot of concerns that now is not the right time, guys. If you have CeeDee Lamb, do not sell him right now. That is not the right time.
You're not going to get
you
the right
missed
value.
it, but he easily would have been my answer even before this happened, because I have never been very high on CeeDee Lamb, at least on his current valuation. But I know this is kind of not really answering your question, but Brian, what are your thoughts on him? Obviously, just because his quarterback goes down doesn't change the fact that everyone thought of him so highly, at least in a talent aspect.
Well, we actually addressed this last week, and I'm going to stick with our answer last week. And I think it's a hold. I don't think it's a buy. I don't think it's a sell. We're not going to get any valuable data with Cooper Rush at quarterback. We're just not. We need to see what Dak comes back. We need to see if we now know that Bucs defense is potentially a top 3 defense in the NFL. I want to see Dak. I want to see CeeDee Lamb against some different defenses, against some of those NFC East defenses. We talked about Washington. I want more data, so I'm not buying, I'm not selling. Of course, always, if you get in a crazy price, go for it. If you get him super cheap, go for it as well. But in general, I'm holding. I want to throw some sell high candidates out there. You can agree, disagree, or throw some in there as well. Austin Eckler as a sell high. Once again, you want the right price. His usage isn't quite what it was last week. He's RB14, guys. He's still a top running back. But this is a guy likely you spend a top 5, top 6 overall draft pick on. Now he's in RB2 territory. I like him as a sell high if you can get the right price. Alvin Kamara, I was kind of down on him before the season started. His metrics, his yards per carry, a lot of those advanced metrics went way down last year. His production in New Orleans last year was very much volume driven. He only had 12 touches in game 1. Injured, yes, I know we can't weigh that in, but if you can still get a good price for Kamara, I don't like that Saints offense in general. But the biggest one here is Najee Harris for me. RB20, and there's a couple concerns here. One, that Pittsburgh offensive line. This is more for redraft. I'm specifically addressing redraft. 2, the multiple injuries. I'm not sure he's as explosive as he could be. That's a concern to me. And just 3, that whole Pittsburgh offense in general. Even if Pickett comes in, he's still a rookie. Any of those 3 names stand out, or do you have a separate sell high candidate? And then we'll get to
I definitely would have to agree. My only note would definitely be a lot of the players that you mentioned have a little bit of a negative connotation. So I feel like selling them, I'm not saying would be low. Like Alvin Kamara, who's really trying to buy Alvin Kamara right now? It's like, oh my God, I need again. So for my sell highs, it might be a little bit surprising, but some of the ones that definitely come to my mind is Michael Thomas. He's had a pretty good start to the season after said injury. And because he's been playing so well the first 2 weeks, I feel like he could start to capitalize. I feel like towards the second half of the year, Chris Olave should break out a little bit more. Jarvis Landry should get the ball a little bit more, and that running game should start to develop. And I'm not saying Michael Thomas is going to be bad, but I feel like what you're getting right now after he had back-to-back games with multiple, or I think his first game he had 2 touchdowns, last game he had 1 touchdown, he would be a perfect candidate for me. And if I were to look at the running backs, once again, might not be the highest selling candidate, but right now he's had a phenomenal usage. James Robinson. I think Travis Etienne I'm not saying Travis Etienne is going to come and become the workhorse. No. Workhorse, that's James Robinson. But I do believe that Travis Etienne is going to get a little bit more of a work share second half of the year. So if you really want to capitalize the amount of pure volume and involvement that James Robinson has been getting, I think right now is the right time for any team that might have sustained multiple injuries or think that they're one running back away. I think could flip them for something really good.
That kind of is a good way to transition into the buy low. So we got just under 2 minutes left. We have another question in the chat I want to get to. We'll do some start sits maybe for the last minute. I'm going to throw some buy low candidates out there. We'll kind of do the same thing. You can agree, disagree, and then maybe throw some of your own. Buying low, Dalvin Cook, RB28. I'm really high on him. They mentioned in the offseason with this Kevin O'Connell offense, he's going to get a lot more involved in the passing offense. He did get 20 carries in week 1, but when they were down, didn't get much last night. Granted, the Eagles looked amazing on both sides of the ball. Kyle Pitts, I think, is a huge buy low. I don't care if he's been... Arthur Smith is crazy not to get him involved. So this is a great time for somebody who's disillusioned, who might have spent a second or third round pick on Kyle Pitts. Go after Kyle Pitts. And then Dameon Pierce. Got a lot more carries in week 2. Took over the backfield already from Rex Burkhead. 4.6 yards per carry against a pretty good Denver defense. Any quick buy low?
You hit the nail on the head. A buy low. That's take away the episode. You can't do any better than Kyle Pitts. He has been nothing but disappointing. And the people who drafted Kyle Pitts with the draft capital he had for your startup, I guarantee is frustrated. So it could go one of 2 ways, right? People who want all that value back being like, all right, I spent a 3rd, 4th round pick for Kyle Pitts. I must get something worth a minimum of who I could have drafted there. So they're going to stay and hold, or the complete opposite, be like, all right, I'm done with this. I will trade him for, TJ Hawkinson plus one of the sell highs that we just mentioned for Kyle Pitts. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll give you Kyle Pitts plus X, Y, and Z. I think that is definitely the name to go for sure.
All right, we get just under 30 seconds left. We have a question for Start Sit. R.A. Avila 1 says, what up, Tony Pollard or James Robinson for RB2 this week? I really like Pollard. I think he's shown with Cooper Rush that passing offense, he's going to get some involvement in a PPR league. What about you, Tommy?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's Pollard, and it's nothing negative against James Robinson, but they do have a lot of mouths to feed, ironically, over in Jacksonville right now with all the money that they paid through free agency. There's the bell, but I do agree. It is definitely Pollard's where I would lean to.
The gong means it's halftime. I know Tommy. Tommy loves to talk in a good way. He always has amazing information to give. This format might be a little limited. Make sure to check out PDL Dining. It's great. If you want to hear a podcast specifically about a Dynasty League, it's so in-depth, the amount of content that Tommy puts out. So check up on Spotify, PDL Dining, DYNING. You will not regret it. Real quick, last question. Richard J. Buy low on Darnell Mooney. He was my buy low last week, but that Chicago passing offense, I don't know. Yeah, you might be able to get really low if you get the right price. I would say yes. Still, one more week, maybe no, but yes, still buy low on Darnell Mooney.
I think that's how you know it's a buy low if you feel uncomfortable. Because if you say someone who's going to smash, they're not a buy low. Right now, Darnell Mooney, a lot of sour taste in your mouth, absolutely go after him, in my opinion. I think right now is the bottom of what you're going to be able to get, so might as well go for it now rather than waiting for a blow-up game and then thinking, dang it, I really should have gave away X, Y, and Z just to get him.
All right, so that is the end of the game. We have at the post-game press conference, Tommy, how do you feel your team did today?
Feeling pretty good. I was a little bit chattier than I probably should have been, but overall, feeling pretty good. And like I said, I'm currently sporting a Reebok sky blue and yellow throwback Eagles jersey of John Runyon. So I'm feeling pretty good and be able to talk to you and chat with Anthony a little bit. Overall, don't think I could have started my day any better.
We are going to go into some brief overtime. We still have questions coming in. And I feel like this is our one fantasy episode. And shout out to Takaido Luna, who mentioned, does that mean overtime? Yes, Takaido, we're calling an audible. We tied. Tommy and I go way back on the podcasting. So we're going to go into brief overtime. If anybody has any other questions, throw them in there. Why not? Cortland Sutton and Javonte Williams, two Broncos. And one of the questions we didn't get to actually involved the Broncos offense. So I love that this came up. Thank you, Jack, for Dalvin Cook in half PPR. Quick thoughts, Tommy.
Yeah, I think real quick thoughts is it just depends on what your mentality is. Are you okay with splitting what one person can give you with two external parts? For me, this is an absolute yes. And this isn't because I don't like Dalvin Cook. I just think a lot of people are thinking that the Denver Broncos are like a sinking ship. As long as Russell Wilson's there, even though he's off to a slow start, I do expect them to bounce back. And Cortland Sutton and Javonte Williams should be beast.
Yeah, I'm actually, this is kind of interesting. I'm slightly siding on Dalvin Cook. I'm actually worried about Hackett running that offense. I think we've seen after 2 weeks with two bad defenses. You've got Houston and you've got Seattle, where this Broncos team hasn't really moved the ball. The play calling has been suspect. I love the talent in Javonte, Cortland Sutton. Before the season, maybe it would have been iffy. But I think Dalvin Cook's best days are ahead of him in that Kevin O'Connell offense. So we're going to wrap it up there. Guys, thank you so much for listening. I have some questions. We might put these on Thursday's show when we have Pro Football Demon on, previewing Thursday Night Football. Maybe we'll have some fantasy questions. If you guys have some last-minute fantasy start-sit questions, check out our Thursday show, 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. That is it, guys. Check out Legit Football. We have our power ranking show tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. We have Jimmy Ray from NFL Stats. Really excited to debut our power ranking show. Thanks, as always, for listening and watching. This has been 30 Minutes of Football with Legit Football. See you tomorrow. That's spicy. Jimmy Garoppolo on there could be a benefit, but have they kind of burned that bridge?
We'll say this. Gardner Minshew is the best backup in the NFL.
I love Gardner.